Good morning and welcome to the 2021 ODOT ACEC Partnering Conference virtual event. As a reminder, we will be accepting questions in the question box throughout today's session, so please enter your questions there. And now I'd like to introduce the Director of the Ohio Department of Transportation, Dr. Jack Marchbanks.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be with you today, and welcome to this year's virtual meeting. I am certain that this time next year we'll be meeting in person because Ohioans and citizens across the United States are diligent in beating back this pandemic. So we are excited about having all of you with us virtually today. And it's a great privilege to present to all of you. One of my top priorities during my time at ODOT has been to establish and maintain policies that continue to grow diversity and inclusion at the department and with our partners. To do this, we must weave the very best lessons of the civil rights movement, the great American civil rights movement, into the cultural fabric of the department. We have made much progress in the last few years. Again, we talk about going from compliance to commitment, and we're living that every day. And in fact, this is something that not even our Chief of Staff, Pamela Vest-Borton, knows. I like to surprise her every now and then. We have an exciting initiative that we're planning for next year, and this will involve ACEC. I've been in contact with Paula Jegba, Michigan DOT Director, and there's no prohibition against talking to good people in Michigan. I've been in contact with Paul, and he has a fantastic program where he reaches out to the 14 HBCUs that have engineering programs. So we're going to do him one better. We're going to not only reach out to the 14 HBCUs that have engineering programs, we're also going to reach out to those schools that have large concentrations of Latinos and Asian American Indians. And we hope to, in 2022, bring an unprecedented number of engineering interns of color to the Ohio Department of Transportation and hopefully to a lot of your firms. So I look forward to working with all of you on this project and others in the future. You know, we're talking about human infrastructure right now, but let's talk about actual infrastructure. Another top priority at ODOT is to ensure as much equity as possible is distributed across the state as we do the projects, as we keep our system in a state of good repair. It is essential to address the infrastructure needs in all 12 of our districts. The needs, as usual, far outweigh the available resources, but through diligent planning and data-driven decision-making, we can maintain our existing system and make strategic inroads where new construction is required. The recently passed transportation budget by Ohio's legislature will provide sufficient funding to improve the state's highway and bridge network. This year's legislative process certainly wasn't as dramatic as the 2019 budget hearings when we were pursuing a state gas tax, which we are certainly happy was enacted. In fact, the timing of that was most serendipitous, and that those states that have tried to get revenue increases since 2019 have not succeeded. So I am grateful for the support from our partners, including ACEC, in helping push forward legislative approval for that landmark revenue increase. We would indeed be in dire straits if it hadn't occurred 2 years ago, as we saw a dramatic decrease in our revenues caused by COVID. I'd like to share with you a few highlights of the budget we will operate over the next few years. These are the dollars we are going to invest in our system over the next 2 years. We're anticipating total revenues of approximately $2.9 billion each year. For the 2-year period, this equates approximately to $2 billion for pavement work, $500 million for bridges, $318 million for safety projects, $718 million for the local program, and $200 million for major new construction. Unfortunately, we are expecting a revenue reduction of 9%, about $174 million from previous estimates for 2022, and a reduction of 8% for 2023, about $159 million. Again, these are unavoidable impacts that were wrought upon us by the pandemic, but we have been budgeting conservatively and we are absolutely confident that we can keep our system in a state of good repair, and of course, safe. So this budget also contains provisions that would help the department optimize dollars. And I can't speak highly enough of Rich Winning, Sarah Downs, Pamela Best-Borton, our chief engineer, Lloyd McAdam, and of course, Mitch Blackford, our assistant director for field operations. All three of these assistant directors and their very able direct reports have done yeoman's work in helping us save dollars to smartly invest the monies that we have. So thanks to their efforts and the revenue formula modernization from the last transportation budget, our maintenance, preservation, safety, and local programs are still funded at pre-pandemic levels. Very few states can claim that. We are taking care of our system, our first priority. Governor DeWine and the legislative action from 2 years ago will allow our work to continue in the state almost uninterrupted. Again, Ohio is in a very good place. We're expecting to work well with our design professionals at ACEC, and we are expecting progress, as the Lieutenant Governor shared with me this morning. We're expecting strong progress in the Buckeye State, and it could not happen without professionals like yourself, of course, our great team members at ODOT, and our local partners as well. So I wanted to say thank you to all of you. We have lots of work to do, and we are so blessed and fortunate that we have the resources with which to do it. So thank you for allowing me to speak to you these few moments. Back to you, Victoria.
Thank you, Director. And now we'll hear from Beth Easterday with ACEC.
Good morning. Thank you, Director. And welcome to what is our 9th ODOT ACEC Ohio Partnering Conference. I am Beth Easterday, President of ACEC Ohio, and I am excited to say that we have approximately 300 virtual attendees today. This conference was started with the mission of promoting the understanding and cooperation between the public and private sectors, with the end goal of providing professional services to the public in the most effective manner possible. This is the one time a year that we can join together and connect, communicate, and build trust between the consulting industry and the public sector. Keeping the momentum going is important, even if we have to go virtual this year. The Partnering Conference Planning Committee decided to focus deeper from a topic at our last conference in 2019, letters of interest, and they aptly titled it, "Tell Me What You Want, What You Really, Really Want." I want to personally thank all those who spent the time to make this virtual session happen. My hope for today is that this conference will create the opportunity to learn from each other while we continue to develop the strong working relationship between our two organizations. We will definitely see you in person in 2022, and I look forward to that day. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce Lloyd McAdam, Chief Engineer of ODOT, who will go on with talking about what's happening at ODOT. Welcome, Lloyd.
Good morning, Beth. Thanks for that introduction there. So let me share my screen here. And here we go. Let's see.
Looks great.
Got it? Okay, great. All right. So let's go into a little more detail of what Director Marchbanks was just talking to us about here. So talk about our transportation outlook for 2021 and 2022 and beyond. So first and foremost, let's get some really good news out here. Just yesterday, the OTEC Steering Committee, which is made up of Beth Easterday, myself, Lori Leffler from Federal Highways, Allison McKay from Dr. Allison McKay from Ohio State University, and Sonia Simpson from Michael Baker and Associates. We decided and are moving forward with a live OTEC in 2021. So this is great news for everybody. And I also just a confirmation from Lisa Hall that our dates of October 26th and 27th are good. So we are going to have a live OTEC in the fall of this year on October 26th and 27th. And that is confirmed with the convention center. So that's some great news, and I look forward to seeing you all live versus on a computer screen like we're doing now. So I'm really excited about that. So that's some great news. I want to get out there right away. Secondly, let's talk about and go back to as Director Marchbanks was saying. And back in 2018, when ODOT was putting its budget together for 2020 and 2021, we were at a fiscal cliff. We literally did not have enough money to take care of what we had. We had $150 million worth of projects that were our preservation, taking care of our pavements and our bridges that we could not use. We actually couldn't spend that money. So it was really a bad situation for us to be in. So we, under the direction of the new incoming governor, Mike DeWine, and Director Marchbanks, we put forth, as you all know, what came out as House Bill 62. And after much work by you, your ACEC members, as well as some of the consultant members, contractors members, a lot of us talked to our legislators. House Bill 62 was approved in April of 2019, and we started receiving additional receipts. And what the good news for ODOT was the new increase, the 10.5 cents increase on automobile, obviously gasoline, and then the 19-cent increase on diesel was going to give the additional $450 million a year to the Department of Transportation and about $370 million a year to our local governments. This was some great news to obviously the state of Ohio and its infrastructure partners. So we started receiving receipts of this money back in July of 2019, and it was going pretty much as planned. We were doing very well until March of 2020, and we all know what happened in March of 2020. We had what was called the pandemic hit us. So this is a chart that shows 2019 ADT versus the 2020 and 2021 ADT that happened during the pandemic. So what you'll see is two lines in this on this chart. The purple line represents the actual revenue, actually the ADT of cars in the state of Ohio. So you can see in March of 2020, we had a 24% reduction from 2019 numbers, and then 48% reduction in April. April was obviously the heart of the downturn when we were locked down, and then we started to come back a little bit in May, 33% reduction in cars, and then a 19% reduction in June of 2020. The one thing on the top part of this chart is the truck ADT. So you can see that it was 3% down in March and then dropped to 18% down in May, and then back up to 10% down. And actually in June of 2020, it actually flipped over and it went positive. And you can see that it is 5, 4, 4, 7, 7, 9, 13, 5, and 11% each of the last basically year or so. So we are seeing a significant increase in our truck traffic, and that's a good thing. That's helping us from the revenue resources. One thing you should know about ODOT, it's 98% funded by revenues that come from motor vehicle user fees or gas tax. We get about 1.7 billion a year from the state motor fuel tax, and roughly 1.4 billion coming from the federal government that's coming that way. So significant, obviously a significant part of our money comes from the revenue that we get from the gas tax. And you can see that as you can see this statewide, the cars have remained. The most we ever got was a 12% decrease from the 2019 numbers. That's the highest we ever got, and it continues to be. And matter of fact, we just got the numbers for April, and it looks like it was actually under the 10% threshold of ADT, around about an 8.5%, 9%. So that's some really good news for us. So we're finally coming back, and this is basically giving us what our revenue projections are. So let's go on and talk about what this did to our revenue. So fiscal 2020 actual revenue, it was down 239 million. And let me remind you what fiscal 2020 was. Fiscal 2020 starts actually June 30th of 2019 and goes through starts July 1 of 2019 and goes to June 30th of 2020. So we only had basically 3.5 months of the pandemic, March, April, May, and June, that basically came down there and got us. So that those 3 months, basically 239 million of revenue lost in the state, just the state motor fuel taxes that came in. ODOT's share was 154 million of that, and the local shares was about 81 million. So a significant amount of drop just to get us to June 30th of 2020. Then we estimated, and we're still estimating, around a 10% reduction for the fiscal year that began July 1 of 2021, our fiscal 21. And so that total reduction is estimated to be around 300 million across the state. ODOT share will be about 208 million, and the local share is about 93 million. So a significant reduction for this year, and we are right on track for that. Our last numbers in April showed us we were just under or a little bit over that 10% reduction, and with the traffic numbers coming back a little bit better now here in May and in June, we're expecting to be right around 10% for the year end. So you can see ODOT share is going to be about 208 million of that. So significant loss of revenues. So if you go back 239 million and then 300 million in 2021 estimated. So we obviously had to put a transportation bill into House Bill 74 was actually introduced earlier this year, and we called it the Cost Savings and Efficiency Budget. And we also had a continuing pledge towards $100 million of savings, as the director was just talking about. And I can report on our last one red line report out from Rich Winning from the department that we are just over 60 million in savings from the 4 years. So Director Marchbanks promised to the legislature in the next 4 years we will save $100 million in operations, and we are well on that way on that goal of 60 million. So part of that bill, as the director just mentioned, we are about down 9% in revenues from what we expected to get prior to the pandemic, and 8%. So 2022 is down 9% and 2023 is down 8% in the two biennial budgets that are approved by the legislature now. As Director mentioned, we're maintaining our funding levels on all of our programs that are preservation and safety based. Safety is still going to be at $156 million a year. Again, you will recall 2 years ago, we improved that by 50 million a year more than our original $106 million a year we used to spend. We're also going to continue our maintenance and preservation dollars. As has been discussed here, those will continue as we've always done, and we have enough to take care of what we've got for several years in the future here. We're also going to continue to do our local discretionary dollars at the same levels we've done historically in the past. And we've also got some news from the federal government. There are some federal stimulus dollars potentially coming our way. So let's talk about that. So first and foremost, there was the second Coronavirus Response and Relief, or CRRSA Act, which was passed December 27th of 2020, did give the state DOT across the country a significant share of monies. And ODOT's share of that transportation backstop was about $333 million. That represents basically the revenue loss of the first 6.5 months of the pandemic for the state of Ohio. So as you can see, it doesn't take care of the whole thing that we've experienced at this point, but for the first 6.5 months, it is a backstop and it allows the Department of Transportation to at least utilize those monies to keep things going closer to revenues that we were hoping to get pre-pandemic. So here's a snapshot of ODOT's capital program for the last 13, 14 years. Beginning in 2011, you can see we're around $1.6 billion, and 2012, 2013, and you recall in 2013, and 2017, we had the two turnpike tranches, which we maximized up to around $2.4 billion in 2014 and 2015, and then we were back up to $2.3 billion in 2018 with the additional $500 million. So $1.5 billion came from those turnpike bonds. So you can see the drop off between 2019 and 2020, and that was that revenue loss that we mentioned. The department chose to move two large track projects totaling over $200 million and not sell those projects, moving from 2020 into 2021. Therefore, you can see the slight bump in 2021 as we're going to sell those two projects this fiscal year. And you can see a steady, we were hoping to get a steady, basically $1.9 billion program pre-pandemic, and now it's going to be slightly less than that, around $1.8 billion for 2022, 2023, and 2024. So good. It's not as good as it could have been with the pandemic numbers, but it's still better than we thought, given what's happened to us as far as the pandemic. Our overall construction programs for 2021 and 2022, which is included in this, you can see that we're going to spend $1.946, or basically almost $1.95 billion of projects in 2021. 1.6 of that billion is coming from the ODOT lead. Around $350 million is coming from our local lead partners. 699 total projects from ODOT and 231 total projects for a total of 930 projects in 2021. And a slight reduction of 1.86 and 920 projects in 2022. And I must put a caveat to that. That is assuming there are no additional revenue sources coming our way. And we think that that's probably not going to be the case, but this is the worst case scenario for the department. So just to give you a little program type of the type of work that we're going to do in 2021 and 2022, you can see the number of projects we're going to be doing each year in bridges and culverts. You can see a $308 million in 2021 and $345 million in 2022 on bridges and culverts. Major projects, we have $641 million worth of projects. That's a little bump up because of those two projects being thrown in from 2020 into 2021. And then other miscellaneous projects such as lighting and guardrail and herbicidal spraying, as well as our mowing and other things, about $114 million in 2021 and $128 million in 2022. Pavements, that's our big one typically, $544 million worth of pavements in 2021 and $564 million in 2022. So, and then of course safety is going to, many of those top 150 safety intersections that we talked about to pass the revenue budgets back in 2019 and 2020 are now coming to fruition in construction. $339 million worth of construction this fiscal year, and next year $422 million. So significant numbers there. And you can see those totals that were similar to what we just looked at previously. Consultant work. So just a review back from 2020, a calendar year during the pandemic, we were very proud to say that we spent $154 million on our consultant program. Obviously pre-pandemic January, we had $59 million of typical projects, of preservation type projects going out. And then we had a special safety programmatic in February that basically gave a lot of money towards our safety program. And then in May, we gave a $38 million worth of work out. And then in September of 43, a total of $154 million in calendar year 2020. This year, in January, we had 58 projects for around $53 million in design fees. Our May programmatic is currently posted right now and has 49 projects in it with $57 million of fee. And we're expecting something similar to the January and May programmatics in our September program. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as I talk about track in just a minute. Speaking of track, our future track budgets were reduced due to the revenue reductions from $150 million a year to $100 million. However, we are putting some of the CRSA money that was mentioned earlier into the track this year, and we'll have about $200 million to dedicate towards our track projects this fiscal year. Track is also using an expedited schedule for our 2021 projects. We've already had the application period through the month of March in 2021. We're currently in and have held one of our regional hearings, and we have 4 more regional hearings to go. We had 2 done last Thursday. We have 1 this Thursday as well. And so each of the next couple of weeks, we have a total of 4 more hearings for track. And we're expected to have a draft list out in July and a final list out in August of 2021. And I would suspect as some of these projects make it to that draft list in July, that those projects may fall into some of those design projects might fall into our September programmatic that's coming up this fall. Certainly, if not there, then they'll certainly come into January. As mentioned earlier, and you've heard me say this many times, we feel it's important to get projects ready for a potential stimulus and other federal monies that are coming our way, either from a long-term highway bill or from additional stimulus packages coming from our federal government. So anybody have any questions for me now? I wanted to get through that. That's basically what we've got coming our way. We are expecting additional dollars coming from either the federal transportation bill that is due up at the end of this federal fiscal year, which ends September 30th of 2021. We're hoping that is reauthorized and maybe some additional dollars come towards the state's way. If not, then maybe a standalone infrastructure bill could give us additional dollars coming our way. So anybody have any questions? I don't have the chat box.
There are no questions in the question box.
Great. All right. Well, hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you all in the fall at our live OTEC 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Director. And now we'll hear from Susan Steele with the Office of Consultant Services.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Susan Staley. I'm the administrator for ODOT's Office of Consultant Services. Before I get into updates for you, I want to take a minute to say thank you to everyone. This is the first chance I've had to address this larger group of consultants and ODOT staff. As you know, we were all quite surprised when Matt passed away so unexpectedly last summer. It was quite a shock for our small office of 5. Many of you reached out to us, sent condolences, emails, sympathy cards, and we appreciated all of that. Over the past year, I've been able to speak with some of you in smaller group settings about it, but today I just wanted to take a minute to publicly say thank you to all of you. I can't believe it's been almost a year already, but we do appreciate your support and your patience over these past several months. I want to recognize all the work that Matt accomplished, and I want to say that our office continues to work diligently in cooperation with all of you to support the mission of ODOT. So regarding updates from consultant services, I'm going to step back in time for a second to review a couple of the items that came out of ODOT's conciliation agreement with FHWA last year. As a result of that conciliation agreement, at the end of 2020, we implemented several new items as an agency, and those items should all be in full swing now. But specific to consultant services, the districts and offices are performing CUF interviews with the DBE firms to evaluate if each DBE's work can be counted towards ODOT's overall agency goal attainment. So those interviews are now underway. We also made some changes to the subconsultant payment reporting requirements. Prime consultants are now required to report all payments to all subconsultants on a monthly basis in our subconsultant payment system. ODOT districts and offices are also monitoring to make sure those prompt payments are being made. And one other item related to the conciliation agreement that I want to mention is the CUF training for consultant construction inspectors and construction engineers. Last year, FHWA clarified that consultant construction inspectors and engineers act as an extension of ODOT staff in the field. And because our staff performs CUF evaluations in the field, the consultant inspectors and engineers also had to be trained to perform CUF evaluations out in the field. So that CUF training course was rolled out last December and must be taken online on an annual basis. On a related note, also regarding construction inspection, ODOT continues to encourage the use of project inspector interns on our construction inspection agreements. Districts are encouraged to include project inspector interns on their scope documents, but consultants can still offer interns even if it's not specifically called out in the scope document. And this effort will ultimately help to increase the number of project inspectors available within the industry. So switching gears and talking about our May programmatic, our office has recently posted some announcements that I hope you've seen. But moving forward, projects with a design fee of $5 million or more will include a presentation and interview portion as part of the selection process. I'm sure you've seen that we have 3 projects in the current May programmatic that include a presentation portion. Also beginning with May, for projects with a design fee of $5 million or more, the proposed participation of any subconsultant performing $2 million or more will be evaluated during the selection process. So in the case of a sub performing $2 million or more, that sub's workload and availability of key personnel will be evaluated if the sub has also submitted an LOI to be a prime consultant for another project within the design category. Another topic related to the May programmatic, PPP loans and fee negotiations. And we're talking the August, September timeframe for the fee negotiations for those. I want to state that for the most part, ODOT will continue following our normal process when determining payment types on consultant agreements. And that is for each district to evaluate each agreement or situation on a case-by-case basis. With the PPP loan forgiveness situation, however, Our office will continue to work closely with ODOT's Office of External Audits, and we as an agency will be more cognizant and restrictive about allowing lump sums if we know that a firm will have a large overhead rate change during the course of the work that we're negotiating. So moving on to updates that will be implemented with the September programmatic. Beginning with September, a new ITS design and operations pre-qualification category will be in effect. If you have any questions about that new category, please contact Dan Krakovic in our office. Also, ODOT's Division of Opportunity, Diversity, and Inclusion, or ODI for short, has been working with ODOT and ACEC representatives to update the development goal criteria for LOI submissions and consultant selections. So for projects that include a development goal, the total maximum score of 5 will remain the same when the development goal plans are being scored during selection, but the criteria to meet the total 5 points is being revised. Jolita Stoltz from ODI has been leading those efforts, and she has presented the updated criteria in several forums this spring. So chances are you've already seen one of her presentations, but the updated criteria will take effect with the September programmatic group, and the posting document will clearly outline what's been updated. So be sure to review that posting if you submit on such a project in September. Excuse me. Also on a related note regarding development goals, I know that firms sometimes are challenged with teaming on projects that have a development goal, as far as what DBE and EDGE firms are out there that want to be developed and what do they want to be developed in. So this is a plug for ODI's website. If you don't already know, ODI hosts a DBE and EDGE capability statement website. So DBE and EDGE firms that provide professional services can list the categories they are pre-qualified in, as well as what they want to be developed in. So this may be one resource that you find helpful when looking for firms to team with. Next, I want to mention that ODOT is starting to take a look at the existing CES evaluation questions. The goal is to review the existing questions and rewrite them if necessary to more accurately reflect the specific type of work that was included in the consultant agreement. For example, if it was design work versus construction inspection work. This effort is currently underway, so we will provide more information on that once the group comes up with their recommendations. I also want to talk about our exciting news about our new pre-queue system. Although this project has taken longer than anticipated, our software developer is finalizing their work, and we are getting close to going live with the pre-queue system. So this system will be specific to the consultant pre-qualification process. As you all know, getting pre-qualified is currently a paper process, but pre-queue will provide an electronic format for uploading documents for your pre-qualification submissions and renewals. Our office has worked with a small committee of ACEC representatives, and we were able to give them a demo and answer some of their questions in preparation for rolling this system out. Excuse me, I apologize, my allergy medicine is not cutting it this week. But we expect a rollout of pre-queue within the next 2 months or so. And I will say that it will be a gradual implementation. And what I mean by that is, once the system goes live, key personnel and firms can begin populating pre-queue profiles, but pre-qualification renewals will continue to be on a rolling basis. So for example, a firm that just recently received a pre-qualification approval won't need to utilize the pre-queue system until their next renewal submission comes due. So stay tuned on the pre-queue rollout. As we have more information on that, on how we will implement that, we will communicate that to all of you. Last but not least, I want to announce that our office is welcoming a new member. Lori Brinkman is joining our office as an analyst. Many of you probably already know Lori from her work in District 1, but we are excited to have Lori coming on board. So as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our office. And with that, I will turn it over to Michelle May, who is moderating the panel session. Thank you, everyone. Michelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Susan. All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here on this semi-sunny day here in Ohio. Victoria, do you have the slides ready?
I do. I'm putting those up right now.
Thank you. And let me take this moment, because we often forget, a virtual round of applause for Victoria and her staff. They run these go-to sessions like a boss, and we really appreciate everything you do. So web round of applause for the people who make these kinds of things happen. So thank you, Victoria. My name is Michelle May. I manage ODOT's highway safety program. Some of you might know me by my unofficial official title, which is the First Lady of Safety at ODOT. And I'm going to be your moderator for today's session, which is tell me what you want, what you really, really want. And for those of you who missed the reference, this is actually a Spice Girls song from the 1990s, not the 1960s for sure. 1990s Spice Girl reference. And during this session, we're going to have a very interactive, frank discussion about what consultants think ODOT wants to see versus what actually ODOT staff wants to see. And it's going to be a two-way conversation. So we're going to have a lot of discussion about both the ODOT perspective and the consultant perspective. So we're going to cover three main topics today over a series of questions. We're going to cover LOIs, we're going to cover meet and greets, and then we're going to talk about some effective ways to promote new project managers, which we all hope we can do without losing any points on your LOI. So with that, let's go to the next slide. So today we've assembled our own little spicy panelist of both ODOT and consultant veterans who are going to share their perspectives. And then at the end of the session, you're going to get an opportunity to ask them questions directly. So as we go along, if you can populate the chat box with your questions, then when we get to the end, I think we're going to have about 15 minutes or so to have you interact with the panelists. As you're asking those questions, if you want to pose them to specific people, please put that panelist name in the chat box. And if not, we will randomly assign them. They're all very qualified experts. So our panelists, as you turn on the cameras, you're going to see Mike Kubek of District 12, Stefan Spinosa, District 8, Cindy Wengerter from District 6, Bonnie Teewen from Osborn Engineering, Josh Conley from JMT, and Harvind Singh from Singh & Associate. And if we do this right today, folks, this will be a two-way conversation so that we can better understand each other as both ODOT and consultants, as well as our roles and our challenges in the selection process. So with that, Victoria, if you could take away the slides, and we're going to focus on our panelists. So let me jump into our first question of the day, and this one is for Cindy. So collectively, ODOT and the consulting community made some changes to the selection process since the last ODOT ACEC partnering conference in 2019. Cindy, can you give me a couple examples of how that process has changed and you think it's working?
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Michelle. A couple of the things that did change are the DBE and EDGE goals are now being posted about 10 weeks in advance of the programmatic. And it used to be in the past, sometimes that was not posted up until about 4 weeks before the programmatic. So this was done in an effort to give the consultants more time to plan their teaming arrangements and work with the DBE and EDGE firms and The other thing is ODOT is also posting the project information on the FTP site, which includes, the project narrative, existing plans, studies, all of that information that the consultant would find useful in preparing for their meet and greet or for their LOI. And in the past, sometimes I think those were not posted until 6 or 8 weeks before the programmatic. So those are probably the two biggest changes that have occurred since the last partnering in 2019.
And Cindy, from your perspective, do you think those changes have been beneficial? Do you like them?
Yes, I think so. I think it helps the consultants, like I said, get the opportunity to review all that material and, go out in the field and check the site and, come to meet and greet with their questions that are project specific and also, just preparing their LOI. Also, I know in District 6, something that we've moved to is Tony Tarowski, our planning engineer, has also created videos that give some more detail about the project. So all in an effort to try to inform the consultant as best we can.
Great, thank you, Cindy. Josh, from the consultant's perspective, how do you think these changes are working, and do you have any other suggestions?
Yeah, I actually think, but thank you, Michelle. So the populating of the DBE and EDGE goals, the 10 weeks in advance, has obviously helped us as consultants in solidifying our teaming arrangements as a whole, rather than having teaming arrangements with 2 other firms that may not be DBE or EDGE. And it's allowed us to put together our team as a whole. So when we go into meet and greets, we're actually able to talk about our team, just to make sure that the makeup of our team is what the district's looking for. I know a lot of times in the past we've had teaming arrangements where the DBE and EDGE goal was not posted yet. It may come in a little bit higher than anticipated, and we'd have to reevaluate the makeup of our teams prior after our teaming arrangements have already been set. And also on the FTP site, that obviously, like Cindy mentioned, it helps us immensely when we're looking at projects, making selection of which projects we want to pursue, having that information already on there, like the brief scope of work or the project initiation package. It gives us the opportunity to make our LOIs better, more technically sound, and it helps us also when we're preparing for our meet and greets, so that we can make sure that we have questions that the districts can answer. So it's helped out quite a bit. I know there's a couple other things that we did want to mention. Cindy and I talked earlier today too, populating the programmatic list well in advance of the programmatics being posted. It gives us as consultants ample amount of time to perform our research, set up teaming arrangements. Obviously, having the DBE and EDGE is very good too. And it helps us to have a good in-depth discussion with the districts, which projects we know, if we can talk to them either before or after, when we have conversations with the project managers as well. And I know another one, and I'll stop talking here in a second, but the use of graphics on LOIs, I know has came into play lately on a couple projects. We all know it's easier sometimes to tell a story when you can use graphics rather than a block of text. It's easier to look at. It's easier to understand. But we also know that, I think from ACEC's perspective, that some firms could be put at a little bit of a disadvantage if they don't have the teammates or team members that can create the graphics that some of their larger firms do have.
Bonnie and Harvind, do you have any different perspective, or do you agree with Josh, or maybe one of your thoughts, or both?
No, I think the transparency of knowing the DBE goals 10 weeks ahead of time is a huge benefit for the DBE firms. And I got to say that I loved Tony's videos. It was fabulous. And I believe we told District 6 that. But transparency is good and bad. So now we all know so much about the same project. I don't know how you expect us to differentiate our LOIs when we start telling you how we're going to design it, because we all have the same great ideas because we're all qualified. So I'd love to hear what you guys are looking for in an LOI, but knowing 10 weeks ahead of time who I should target to be on a team is really, really important as a smaller firm.
Bonnie, do you have anything you wanted to add, or you're good?
Yeah, I would just reiterate, generally speaking, the sooner the information gets posted to us, the better off we are, so that we can prepare for it even more.
Great. Well, Harvind, you've actually dovetailed very nicely time-wise into our next question. So the next question, and this one is specifically for Bonnie. Let's understand each other's perspectives on LOIs. So Bonnie, tell the group, what does it take to prepare an LOI for programmatic?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that once we submit a programmatic, we probably, at least at Osborn, we give ourselves maybe about a week to kind of catch our breaths from programmatic. And then we start looking into the future. In most cases, we look at the next programmatic and what's listed there. That's, to my point, the sooner you get the information posted online, the better it is for us. Sometimes we look to programmatics, but those are usually the larger projects, that obviously you need to spend a little bit more time putting teaming together. So we review the project, we appreciate the information online, we appreciate the videos, that does make a difference. Any plans that are posted, we look at that information. And then we really start trying to figure out which projects fit us, our firm, the best. And we start, the 8 is the max. We might look at 10 or 12 projects just initially that we might fit into nicely. Then when we go through the plans, we start getting a better idea. We'll do a site visit just to get a good idea of what the project is all about. We might even reach out to some of the local governmental agencies that are involved just to kind of get, their ideas or discussion points from that. This is where Josh was talking about who we team with, is we start getting strategic about who we want to team with. We do a little bit research on which consultants are winning in which districts, and that gives us a little bit of heads up on, who we might want to team with. Then we start making phone calls and we talk with other consulting companies about teaming opportunities, looking for reciprocation, maybe not necessarily where we flop on or flip-flop on, the same programmatic on different jobs or different districts, but maybe in future programmatics coming up. So it's very strategic who we team with. And, it's important that we have a good partnership, that you guys view it as one team and not 2 separate consulting companies. So it's good that we have a good working relationship with them. So then we might schedule a meet and greet with the districts after we do all of that to talk specifically about the project. We have identified who our internal team is so that they can be part of that meet and greet as well. So now the list officially comes out. So that's all before the list actually comes out. We're doing all of that. So now the list actually comes out, and then you find out the project you really wanted isn't on the list. So, but honestly, things are getting better. It seems like nothing's coming off the list very often. You're just adding some. And sometimes when you add stuff too, that kind of throws us for a loop. Like, oh, I like that one. I wish we could have spent more time on developing that one. So now the list comes out. Now we solidify the projects that we're going to pursue and who we're going to pursue them with. Having the goals early are good as well, because then that's part of who is going to be on our team. So that's good. So now we're into, okay, we're going after, let's say these 8 projects, if you choose to go after 8. Then we start getting into, we're actually designing that. We're looking at the hydraulics. We're looking at, it's a bridge, beam sizes, we're looking where we're going to make that cut and how the maintenance of traffic is going to be laid out. You know, we have our technical people, our engineering, our billable people actually looking at those items. And I apologize for being too long, but like Josh said, I'll stop talking soon. But we have our technical people write the project approach. And sometimes that's good and sometimes it's not, because technical people are technical people, and they're technical people for a reason, because they're not writers. So then we have to take what the technical person writes, and then somebody reviews it so that it's, you know, complete sentences and actually makes sense, and there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a flow. And that we include all the things that we want to. So now usually the technical person will write 3 or 4 pages of technical stuff. Now we have to figure out what we have to take out. And that's where it gets challenging, because there's so much information and you want to differentiate yourself from everybody else. That's why you have 3 or 4 pages of information, because you've done all this research. Now, how do we cut that down to just 2 pages? So you know, it's kind of a love-hate relationship. We love the 2 pages, but at the same time, we hate the 2 pages because it's a challenge for us. So then once we get to 2 pages, then we send it. The PM usually does the review for the 2 pages, and then we send it to 1 or 2 principals to do a final review before it actually gets in. And I forgot the part about working with marketing department too, to make sure we get the resumes, and for the technical people that are going to be working on it, to get the projects in there that are similar, and then to get all the sub-consultants information. So even on the front end section, which I heard a rumor that sometimes districts don't look at that, but that's the challenging part for us, to get all the resumes in there with all the appropriate project information in that point. So gotcha. I could talk another half an hour, but I won't.
All right, Bonnie, you've convinced me.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. There's a lot of work involved. Hey, Mike, why don't you talk a little bit about the ODOT perspective? What kind of work goes into actually reviewing an LOI with the team at the district?
Sure. Yeah. First, I'll start with Bonnie. It's good to hear, you know, all the effort that goes into it, because, you know, at ODOT, we certainly respect that. But it's good to hear actually, you know, what it takes and the amount of effort you put in. It actually sounds like you're making a movie, right? You have to make all those edits and cuts at the end, but you get all the good shots. So that's really important. Yeah. So from the ODOT side, very similar to what Bonnie said, you know, how she had talked about at the end, they get about a week off and then they start on the next one. Well, if you think about it, we're the same way. We're just moved over about a month and a half, because we're doing all the evaluations and all that. And then when we get our final selections down, you know, we may have a week off, and then we're starting on the next programmatic again as well. So it's the same thing. It's just kind of moved, you know, just shifted about a month or so. So you have to start off with the LOIs. Obviously, the central office takes that first crack at looking at the DBE and EDGE goals and all the pre-qualifications. So they take a look at that before that even gets to us. Then what we start off with, you know, reviewing the draft scope again, because it may have been a while since we put all that together. Make sure we looked at what we posted out there, so that we are aware of what information the consultants have, because sometimes that changes, as we get more information on the project. And then we sit down with the selection team, the project manager, and the scoping team to help put it together. And we talk about some of the key elements and what we're looking for in the project. So then we start reviewing the LOIs, and we're starting with the project approach. And I know that's a challenge to get everything into 2 pages, but that has kind of turned out, 2 to 3 pages, depending on the project. That's turned out to be the sweet spot. I know here in District 12, we average around 70 submittals each programmatic, sometimes a little bit more, a little bit less. So if you imagine, like, we want to be able to, really put the time in and read those and absorb it. If it's more, then we're going to have to skim and go through it, because just realistically, you don't have the time to put into it. So I know it's very challenging, and that's why it's kind of gotten down to that number. But it's because we want to be able to take that seriously and absorb what you have. So then as we start reviewing the project approaches, that's what we're going to base the short list on. We talk about those key points. I know, Bonnie, you're going to find this hard to believe, but, I have my spreadsheet of key points and see if someone covered it, yes or no. And as you're reading through it, some of the consultants identify something that you add, and so you have to go back and see if the other consultants actually covered that. And then in addition to that key points, which kind of gives you, like a comparison, then you're looking for like specific things that set that consultant apart. Some of the things in their approach or in their team that they identified in their approach, make some notes of that. And just really try to find out what's unique about that particular consultant. We also look for like innovative concepts, and like this is one where you're really looking for a balance with the consultant, because we are depending on you for your technical experience, extension of our staff, your concepts, but you also have to be mindful that we are the owners. So as you're putting those things together, we want to see what kind of innovative ideas you might have, but also make sure that you're not like have it narrowed down to only one way. And if there's something that we had a little different in mind, that you're not going to that you're not going to be unwavering from that point. So there is a balance, and hopefully you can convey that in your LOI, that you're looking outside the box, but you also understand that you'll be working with the owner to provide that information to make a good decision. We look to see, is there relative experience in that project approach? Did you cite other projects that you've worked on that builds our confidence in your ability to do the work of the project that we have out? And then did the consultant convey their understanding of the role, like I just described? So once we do that, we develop our short list, which is usually around 6. And then we go back and we reread the approaches, and we reread them, even, I guess, more intensely, because now you're comparing them against 6 rather than just reading the approach towards the project. From that point, we look at the consultant previous scores, and if they don't have any scores in the system, did you provide a reference to another public agency that you work for? Because then we will call those public agencies to find out what their past performance has been. We also look at who the key staff are and how they've assigned and what their expertise matches up to the needs of the project. But on the same token, we're looking at staffing efficiencies. You don't need a surgeon to remove a splinter. So have you acknowledged that? Have you put the technical people where they need to be, but you also, have the developing staff, junior engineers, and making good use of them as well, just like you would on any of your contracts. If you have a team, is there a history of you working together? Do you give examples of that? If it's the first time you're working together, have you clearly identified how that's going to flow? Because you're 2 different firms. Have you mentioned what the approach is going to be, so that it's going to seem like one team to us when we work with you? The project manager, that really is going to vary on a project. We have a lot of bridge contracts in District 12, but sometimes the complexity of the bridge doesn't warrant. That might not be the main expertise that you need. Like the project manager, maybe MOT is the most important driving thing, or maybe working with stakeholders is driving. So, do you have a project manager that can do that? I mean, if you have a project manager who can do all, that'd be great. But, are you, targeting who you have running this project and the needs of the project? And just, I think one thing we've always wanted to make sure that people understand when we do the scoring, especially when it comes to like project manager, that score is not their grade. It's how they rate according, in comparison to the other project managers. So just want to make sure I point that out as well. So after we've gone through all that, we meet, together as we get feedback from our project manager, our team, and then our selection team gets together and we discuss what the scores are going to be. We don't each come with individual scores and then average them out numerically, because we all have different perspectives that we bring to the table. So we actually have our discussions, because sometimes, one person will point out what the other person didn't see, and you want to take that into account to what that score is going to be. And we truly do come to a consensus on those scores. After the scores are done, we're not done yet, because we understand, like Bonnie, just pointed out, and I'm sure the other consultants will attest to, the amount of effort you put in deserves good feedback. So after we've done our selections, then we get together and look at, try to put together all of our comments and give meaningful feedback that will help you in future LOIs. And when you do that, that helps out everybody. It helps you as a consultant. It helps us as ODOT, and then we get a better end product. And I think my fellow ODOT people on the call will attest to it's becoming extremely hard to separate the scores. Is there an echo coming back?
Yeah, you're getting a little bit
Yeah,
feedback, Kubek.
Yeah, it
Okay.
looks like there's a couple of other people that are unmuted. If everyone would stay muted unless you're speaking, that'd be great.
But it becomes very hard to differentiate those scores because the LOIs are getting so good.
Right.
So that's a lot of what goes into it for us.
And there's clearly a lot of work that goes into it in 1 minute or less. Stefan and Cindy, anything that Mike said resonate with you, or do you do it slightly differently?
I think we're pretty consistent. I think the process is generally the same. I agree that, we sort of review things individually at first, looking at our own perspectives, and then come together as our selection team, as well as our project managers and our key staff, to bring additional information. So then you come to a collective consensus type understanding. So I think we do start individually and then come into a more collective group. So it helps. Like Mike said, you may miss something that somebody else highlights, or some technical questions come out. So I think this stuff's true. Mike's exactly right. The LOIs are getting much better. I think putting information on the FTP site ahead of time, giving people a chance to evaluate, call our staff, talk to our people. We are getting LOIs that are much higher quality and very difficult to separate.
Great, thanks, Stefan. Josh and Harvind, any 1 minute or less, anything you want to add to this discussion before we move on to another topic?
I just wanted to put out there that for the DBE firms, when they're putting together or trying to get on teams, they're still very reactionary. The positive is now we've got 10 weeks to call everybody instead of 2 weeks, right? So I think it's important to keep that in mind. And it's just a whole different process when you're trying to be a subconsultant. But when you're trying to be a prime, all of that effort, what I think Bonnie mentioned, all of that effort comes at the expense of billable time, whether you're large or small. And it's a significant amount of effort. So this is where the FTP site and the transparency are a blessing and a curse for you guys and for us. It's a double-edged sword, because you are going to get better information and better design information because you have shared so much. So then it becomes tricky to determine how to make yourself unique as a team. And I think that's what we as consultants are, when we were talking about this before, we're still trying to figure out the magic sauce. And, I don't know what the magic sauce is, but I think we can just continue to try, and I don't want you to not have the transparency, but this is where the meet and greets also come in and become more important, which I know we're going to talk about later.
Awesome. Thank you all. That was a good discussion. Let's move on to question number 3. This one's for Stefan. As a reviewer, what's the #1 thing you want to see in an LOI?
So I think, Mike's sort of hit on some of the things with the LOIs are better quality, and he mentioned looking at what we view as the critical components of the project, whether it's a hydraulic analysis or the critical element that needs design or design exception, something we usually internally are identifying what we think are those critical project elements. So what we like to see in the project approaches is what the consultant views as the critical element or item. That helps us that sort of gives us an understanding. Okay, they understand the scope, they understand what the project is, but also not just identifying it, explaining how they'll address it or how you'll tackle that issue or how you'll manage that concern or critical component. There's been a lot of times where we'll see, hey, here's the critical items, 1, 2, 3, and you get an approach then that talks about one of them or maybe 2 of them, right? So knowing that you identify it, how you propose to handle it, and then that gives us a confidence you have a full understanding of the project and scope. I think, one of the things that we see a lot is there's a lot of times we'll get a firm that will give a lot of discussion in their approach on the existing conditions of the bridge or the existing conditions of the road. We sort of already know that. We want to know how you're going to tackle it. Mike mentioned understanding key roles and critical aspects. So if the hydraulic analysis is a key component, who's going to be doing that for you? Who's that individual that's in that critical role? What's their experience? So it sort of goes hand in hand. What's the critical components of the project? Who's going to be managing it? Whether it's a certain team member, a certain individual, a sub-consultant, how you're going to handle that. And I think, we talk about innovation. We're getting a lot of projects now that are pretty straightforward type stuff in our district. Not a lot of opportunities for that innovative idea. So on those more complex projects, we're probably looking for those innovative ideas. Cost money, how do you save it? On those more routine projects, probably what we're looking for is more cost containment. How are you going to do this efficiently? How are you going to staff it appropriately, like Mike brought forward? Those are the kind of things that are, I think, the key components that we're looking for when the LOIs come in.
Great, thank you, Stefan. Cindy, do you concur, or what do you want to see? What's the number one thing you want to see in an LOI?
I think Stefan covered a lot of the things, but one other thing that I would add is, if you see something in the the scope of the project that you see is there might have been some error or something that we didn't think of, don't be afraid to point that out or open that, bring that up, because, we're not perfect and we might have missed something that was a key or critical item. And so I guess, don't be afraid to mention that so that we can, address it and get the best project possible in the end.
Great, thank you, Cindy. Josh, what Stefan and Cindy just talked about, is that what you expected them to say, or were you expecting something else?
Sorry, I was on mute to try to keep the noise down. No, that's probably exactly what I would expect for them to say. I mean, I know we have a lot of everything that goes into it that we do, that Bonnie had mentioned about what we put into our LOIs. So I mean, honestly, that's exactly what I would expect them to say.
Bonnie, you concur? Yep. Okay. Fair enough. All right, we're going to go on to question number 4. How do you maximize the meet and greet? What works well and what doesn't? Let's start with Cindy.
I guess I would start with, probably the number one thing is to be prepared. I mean, that an agenda is nice, but it's not required. It's nice when you're setting up the meeting and, contacting ODOT to set up the meeting, if you can let us know which project, or if it's if it's the general engineering services task order, or whatever the contract might be. If you let us know what you're interested in, that helps us to know who to have, from our staff in the meeting. I think it's important to allow time for introductions. We want to meet your staff and get to know you all a little bit. And especially important if you have some new staff, or you're proposing, for example, a new project manager, to let that person introduce themselves and speak a little bit about their experience. I think it's always good to share, especially if you're a new firm to the district, kind of share your story and the background of your company. And if you're a firm that we've worked with in the past or are familiar with, it's always good to share updates about your company and, what's changed since the last time we talked. And like I said, it's important to be prepared, review that information that's been posted on the FTP site and come, with your questions. We're there to, answer any questions that you might have. I guess the other thing that I always feel it's important, if you would share any of your project experiences or highlight your successes that, you've had in the last year, and especially important to share any relevant project experience to the project that you're interested in, letting us know, like, hey, we've done a project very similar to this over in another district or another state. That helps us feel comfortable that you can handle that project. So I guess from our perspective, it's just really important to have an open dialogue, and that I really feel like that meeting is your time to share what you'd like to share, and just a good chance for us to get to know each other a little better and just have a good conversation.
Nice work, Cindy. Good, succinct feedback. I appreciate it. I made notes, and I'm not even doing the meet and greet. I guess I am the person being met and greeted, I guess, so that's good to know. Mike, you have any experience you want to share on the meet and greet? What works for you? What you like? What your staff?
Yeah, so Cindy covered it very well. At District 12, our format is to let the consultant set the agenda, and that's really worked well because you can really see how they distinguish themselves based on what's going on. And I think Cindy kind of pointed out, I looked at it like 3 different areas. There's like the big picture that you can point to, like where the firm is going, what are some recent changes in their policies, processes, that kind of a thing. Then any like staff specific changes, and then you get down into the project specifics. But it all depends on where the consultant is at. What's changed in their company, when's the last time they came in. It's good to also, we deal a lot with the principals, the owners, some of the managers, but sometimes it's good to see the staff level who's actually going to be working on that project. So that's good as well. It's just really where the consultant is and at that time. And we found 45 minutes to be the sweet spot. Sometimes we don't limit how often a consultant can come in. So we've had a consultant say, hey, we don't have a whole lot that's changed, but we do want to talk to you about this. Can we do 30 minutes? Like, sure. Because sometimes if you have that 45 minutes, if you say 45 minutes, if they take up 30, then it feels like an awkward silence. They think they have to fill it. And that actually could be more damaging, trying to fill empty space. Just whatever you think you need with the 45-minute max, let us know. And it really seems to be working out well. Yeah. And I have a side note for meet and greets. Yeah, this one's free too. I won't even charge a tip. If you show a presentation, when you're done, turn off the presentation, because like we are all dying for personal interaction. So the more like faces we can see, the better. But if you leave your presentation up with your last slide, then everybody's face is little and it doesn't feel as personal.
Agreed. I like that too. I like to see people's faces. It makes it more personal. I also harken back to something Stefan said earlier, and that was, don't waste your time going over stuff I already know. Focus on the stuff that I don't, or us as a group. What don't we know that we need to know? So make good use of that time. Stefan, do you have anything you wanted to add before I switch over to Josh?
No, I think those are all good points. I think from our district perspective, I think the question always comes up, is it required that you come to a meet and greet to be considered? I know each district is probably a little different. I don't think we know everybody's time's critical, not only our time, but consultants' time. So I don't want consultants to say if they can't get into a meet and greet, it doesn't, at least in our district, doesn't really affect what's going on. We provide the opportunities to talk to our project managers or our technical people writing the scope. So we get that feedback even as a selection committee that firms talk to us or they reached out. So we're getting that information as well. So whether it's not a formal meet and greet, but an outreach to scope clarification, those both all come together when we do our selections. So we're getting that information. So a requirement that you got to be in to meet with us before this programmatic is not something that District 8 really works toward.
Gotcha. Thank you. Josh, what's your perspective on meet and greets? What do you think works, doesn't work?
Yeah, so it's probably going to be a little bit of going on top of what Cindy and Mike and Stefan have all said. But I'd say from the consultant side, the biggest thing to maximize them, I would say, is that you have to be prepared going into them. Know the information that's on the FTP site, review the scopes, any preliminary existing plans, visit the site, make sure that there could be some stuff that's out of the ordinary. That way you can maximize the quality of your questions to the district. I think Mike or Stefan or Cindy mentioned that also. Another thing, I would say know your audience. Going into it, you know what projects that you want to talk about. So if you want to have a conversation with the project manager, I know that the project managers are available to have discussions outside of the meet and greets as well. But if you want the PM to be as part of the meet and greet, just ask the district. I know a lot of times they can. If they can't be, they will give you the name or number, email, so you can send them questions too. If it's a bridge project, for example, if you want the district bridge engineer to be a part of the call so you can build those relationships. I know, Mike, we're dying for the social interaction as well. So just make sure if you want to build that relationship with the district bridge engineer, design engineer, anybody, just ask that they can be invited and make sure that you use your time wisely. I am trying to hurry up just an instance of time. I got two more things I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Also, I would say make it more of a conversation. I know somebody already mentioned that, but I know it's the point of the meet and greet is to take the opportunity to present our qualifications, the research, our opinions on the project, laying out the innovative concepts. But you want to make sure it's more of a conversation back and forth, because talking at people, I feel, isn't as effective as talking with them. They obviously already know, the selection committee already knows, or the districts already know why the project's on there to begin with. And if you talk at them, I feel like you may miss out on the keywords that Mike mentioned. If you don't ask them for their opinions, looking for the buzzwords that you could use in your proposal, that it could ultimately get you selected or shortlisted. And then one other thing too, this is from a personal, more of a personal perspective, is you have the 45 minutes, say in District 12, or 30 minutes in another district, or 45 an hour, or whatever it is. But also, you can do this outside of the meet and greet or at the meet and greet, but don't be afraid to address your shortcomings on past projects as well. You can only get better if you know where you've been, and the district knows if you've had issues in certain areas of your firm. So make sure that they know that you're addressing them, and then set a plan in place to address those issues moving forward. And then it's your opportunity to change the perspective, the perception of your discipline of your firm by talking to them, and it may or may not affect the scoring of your pursuit. So that's kind of where I would go with it.
Harvind, you want to add anything to that before we leave this topic?
I think it's really important that if you are a sub firm, that you also go and have your own meet and greet. Even though you are not a prime or you're not planning on priming, if you want to be an added value to your team, it is important that the district knows you individually along with your teammates. So don't think that if you're not priming, the district doesn't need to know who you are, because the team is a partnership and they want to know how you are going to be a member of that team that's going to contribute to the capacity and are providing a useful design function or learning a useful design function. So your own meet and greets become essential, not only for your firm's growth, but for the teams that you are part of. So I would say, and I got to kudos, because every district is more than welcoming, and making that time is definitely not the case in all states. So I think firms need to take advantage of that. Sorry, Mike, Stefan, and Cindy, if everybody now starts to meet you, but it's really nice to meet you.
So
no, that's good stuff, Harvind. Thank you.
Michelle, I have a question for ODOT. So if we do know who our teaming partners are going to be, is it advantageous for you to see the team together in a meet and greet to talk about a project one project specifically, as opposed to them coming in separate to come in as a team?
This is done. I don't think it's necessary. Sometimes it's nice that you tell us and explain. I think we've had it both ways, where we've had each team member come in individually or the teams come in together. And really it becomes, what's your agenda for the meeting? If you're there just to talk one specific project, then it makes sense maybe coming in together. But if you're there to talk other things, it may change, right? So it really goes by what the consultant's agenda is and how what they're trying to talk about at the meeting.
Great.
I would agree with that. We've seen it both ways, Bonnie, and I think where we've seen probably the most teaming is on like the larger projects, like our $100 million rehabs, that are pretty complex, and the consultants felt it was best to show how they were going to work and integrate together, and so that's when we saw that. But it's really, what point do you want to make? I guess is the key.
Awesome, good conversation. So let's move to question number 5. So there's a lot of turnover occurring in our transportation industry. And I think we all want to promote the next generation of transportation leaders. So let's start with you, Stefan. What's the best way to integrate a new PM into the process without losing points on your LOI? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so I think, a new PM, or we were seeing that deputy PM role more and more coming in. Well, I think the way we tend to want to handle that in our district, want to see is if a consultant's proposing a new PM or a deputy PM relationship where they're bringing in a mentor or somebody to assist, that the LOI or the approach clearly identifies how that relationship's working internal to their teaming structure. So we understand you're just not putting somebody there to just be a name on the approach or key role. So that's probably the first thing we're looking at is why are they being proposed to have a deputy or a new PM or support role? How's that going to work? Scoring is always a question. I don't want to put a new person in and lose scores on the PM. And we understand that. I think the process is laid out where you're scoring them. I think Mike mentioned that you're scoring relative to that grouping. So it's difficult to say that you're not going to lose points. Typically what we've done in our district and how we handle it is typically we're seeing that on roles where the project manager role is not the critical component. So you can get a tighter scoring spread and everybody's within 1 or 2 points. And then what we do is we look at, okay, you're bringing that deputy PM in, you're going to be cost effective because you're right sizing the scope of the staff. You're bringing in some cost effectiveness to the approach. So you may not get a full 10 points or 9 points on the PM role, but we will look at that staffing arrangement or the project approach and account for it in those avenues. So that's where we've been handling it in our district is, scoring the PMs of who we see, but then recognizing the deputy PM role, how you explain their use, how that's a cost-effective treatment for this size or scale of a project, and we can score accordingly there. Like I said, I think it's really looking at introducing those new PMs and the deputy PMs supporting on the right size and scale of project. And like in our district, those are ones where the PM role is not the critical differentiator.
Okay. 2 minutes or less, just because I want to get to Bonnie's perspective on this. Cindy or Mike, do you have anything to add to what Stefan says? Do you approach it a little bit differently, similarly? Cindy, you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just unmuting myself. We agree with what Stefan just said, but I also think that that's an important use of your meet and greet time is to, if you're thinking about introducing a new PM, maybe this is a bridge project and this is your lead bridge designer who's wanting to move into project management, having that person attend the meet and greet so we have a chance to meet that person and kind of hear more about their background and experience, I think is really helpful when we, get to the point of reviewing and scoring the LOIs. So
thank you for that. 30 seconds or less, Mike. You have anything?
Yeah, I do want to say I love this question because, the whole purpose of this conference is, the consultants and ODOT are working together because we have a huge responsibility to deliver a program across the state. But we have an equal responsibility to ensure the sustainability of our profession. And that comes with developing, the future engineers and transportation, officials of tomorrow. So it's extremely important. I agree with everything they said. I think as long as you just show that you have a deputy and you have a PM that they're going to be under their guidance. So having, developing them isn't going to be a detriment to the project. And then also I would say, highlight some of the traits that you see in this deputy PM that why have you identified them as your future leader tomorrow. Make sure you address that as well.
Thanks, Mike. That's actually a great idea. I hadn't thought about that. All right, Bonnie, let's tell us how you're handling that from the consultant side.
So this is all good information to hear. Actually, some of the questions that I had, they were able to answer. But Osborn is very conscious about developing younger staff, and I appreciate what Mike said. And I wish I could have said it so eloquently, but Osborn has a history of life employees, you know, where you start with them and what you develop through time. So it's important to us to develop good PMs. So we appreciate the deputy PMs because we struggled with that in the past, that you know, we didn't know how to present a new PM. So we started off with districts that knew us and that were comfortable with us. And, you know, they knew our staff pretty well from previous projects, and we felt comfortable putting in a deputy PM. The struggle becomes when you're working with a new district or you're presenting to a district that you've never worked at before, whether you put that PM. We're kind of shying away from putting in a deputy PM, you know, just for the reason that you really don't know. And you know, if I want to work for a new district, I don't want them to think that they're going to get the B team by having a deputy PM, you know. So we put in our you know, #1 PM. So you guys definitely get the A team, and, you know, we want to make sure that you guys have a good first impression. But I guess the question I have is, when the project's done and you have the PM and a deputy PM, and you're, you know, getting your ratings for the consultant, does the score go to the PM or the deputy PM or both, or how does that work?
Who wants to take that one? Stefan, are you unmuting yourself?
So the system's going to default whoever was the PM listed in the submission, right? So the scoring system is going to fall to that. Again, I've sort of viewed the deputy PM as a member of the staff, so we would sort of comment. It depends on how we've seen it both ways. We've seen like a more experienced PM come in with a newer or lower level, younger staff deputy PM that takes over for the primary PM as the project develops into final design. And we've seen it the other way where you have support. So it just really depends on how the structure is set up when it's submitted, who gets the PM score in the system.
Okay. 2 minutes or less. Anybody want to jump in and add anything else? Josh, Harvind. I just want to make sure we have time for audience questions today. Anyone? Josh? Nope.
No, I'm
Okay.
good. I think they covered it really well.
Got it.
Just,
right.
just as I know Bonnie's question, I think we'll discuss that too. I think that's something I think this, you know, the CPAs will discuss with consultant services and central office. I think we have a tendency to give the PM score to whoever had the most time as a PM on the role of that project. But I think that's a great question that we'll discuss and figure out how to approach that and still encourage, you know, the development of future PMs.
Thanks for adding that, Mike. I think it's good to show that we're trying to be responsive. I have a new appreciation for how hard it is to be a consultant out there. Although
and if Matt Farrell's listening, please add that to our next agenda.
I'm sure Matt's on it. Okay, Victoria, we're at that point where I'd like to look at some audience questions. Do we have any in the chat box?
We do. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the first one that came in actually at the beginning of your discussion. So it says, for the districts, how valuable is it for you to have consultant meetings prior to the programmatic submittals? Is it considered during selection scoring if a firm met with you or not? Have you selected a firm that did not meet with you?
I'm going to go to Mike because I'm keeping score on who's talking. Mike, you go ahead and answer this one.
No, we've absolutely selected consultants who have not met with us. I would say it's really more of how, you know, what the consultant feels they need to do, because just make sure it's valuable time spent. Because if you schedule a meet and greet and it's not very valuable, we're all going to know it. We're all going to feel awkward about it. Just make sure it's valuable, and that does not have a direct impact on your scoring, whether you did or didn't meet with us.
Victoria, what else you got?
Should the LOI process be modified to save time and investment for consultants and ODOT?
Say that again?
Someone would like to know if you feel that the LOI process should be modified to save the time being invested by consultants and ODOT.
Anybody got any thoughts on that? How about you, Josh? I haven't talked to you in a while. You have any thoughts or nope? Punt.
I think there's ways. I think from the last ACEC ODOT partnering conference that there's plans in place to make it a little bit better for everybody. But I also feel that you have to spend money to make money, and you have to. I mean, you got to put the effort in to show the districts and everybody what. I mean, you know that you're the best for the project. So I think there's definitely ways to put different methods in place to make it easier and maybe streamline the process, but I don't think you really want to get away from that, not personally.
Michelle, I guess there's something I'd like to add here, because we try to be mindful of this. Obviously you want to put some effort into it, understand the project and be able to identify certain things, but we don't expect you to do the design that we're supposed to be hiring you for the contract. And sometimes there will be, almost seems like a full design done. And we discussed that as a selection committee, we can't really give that as an advantage, because that's not something we should be expecting all consultants to do a full design when that's what we're going to, hire you for. So we actually kind of have to roll back and say, well, let's not put too much weight on this, because this is not expected of a consultant when submitting something. But, there is a certain amount of effort. Like Bonnie said, you got to look at it, see where the beam, if you look at where the beams are and how that's going to affect NMOT, if that's a big part of it, that's good. But if you've done a whole scour analysis and a hydraulic analysis, we can't put weight on that, because that we can't expect every consultant to do that. That's what we're hiring you for.
Great, thank you. Victoria, other questions?
Sure. Next one, is the meet and greet process the same at central office?
Is the meet and greet process the same as central office?
So
I guess I'm the only central office person on the call. Do you know, Stefan?
Maybe how do you handle meet and greets, Michelle, for your projects?
We on demand. So if you call, we give you at least a half hour, sometimes 45 minutes. Oh, there's Lloyd. Lloyd's here to save the day. How do we handle it at central office, Lloyd?
It is slightly different at central office, because most people are focused on the firm overall, and basically they bring people in when maybe they've hired a new acquisition and showed, here we got a new area of expertise. They aren't talking specific projects with us. They're very generic overall. Hey, how do we do better at doing better at certain districts and those kinds of things. And I spend a significant amount of time at the central office meet and greets, going over the process that has been used by all the districts for quite some time, and give them some tips and clues on how to do a little bit better at that. So it is definitely different at central office. They're more focused on general things, and we're not focused. We do talk about where people ask several times, where's the Department of Transportation headed in the next 6 months? And we talk about those kinds of things. So it's less project specific and more program specific, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, and from a task order perspective, so we run a lot of task orders out of the safety program, and I find that there's a lot of higher level policy discussions, what's the health of the program, what's the direction in which you're heading, because at the end of the day, we're designing safety projects. I mean, they're bread and butter designs that a lot of people can do. It's more trying to help firms communicate what their relevant experience is, and then help them kind of distinguish themselves from other firms, and by providing some insight into what we're looking for in an LOI. So good question. Sorry, I got stumped by that. I'm like, I'm not supposed to take these questions. Thank you, Lloyd, for the assist, and thank you, Stefan, for prompting me. Victoria, other questions?
Next question. How do you view firms that submit on multiple projects in your district on a single programmatic? Could they be number one on 2 contracts?
Cindy, I'm going to pitch that to you.
I mean, we do see that sometimes. We'll have a firm will submit on several different projects. I mean, we don't really, view that as a negative thing. We kind of look at each, project specifically, like the group of LOIs that come in on that project specifically. We're not supposed to consider workload when we're evaluating the LOIs. So I don't feel like we really, consider that. We try to look at them as, just for that project. Stefan and Mike, I'll let you kind of chime in on what your districts do.
I think you're right. I think the evaluation of shortlisting or scoring is sort of siloed by projects. So I don't think, so the answer technically, yes, somebody could score number one on both. I'd be honest, I don't know if we have ever done that or haven't done it. I don't know, but we sort of are viewing it in a silo perspective because we're scoring comparative to what was there. So the same team, the same project manager may get a 10 on one of those projects and maybe an 8 just because of who he's being scored against. So it's really siloed for our district.
Mike, real quick, you got anything to add or nope?
Same thing. We don't score workload at the district. We score project by project. And one thing we always say is when we're selecting on a project, we're not selecting the best consultant. We're selecting the best consultant for that job.
Susan has trained us well. Okay, more questions, Victoria?
When does ODOT consider selection subfactors when posting programmatics?
This is a jump ball. Who wants to take it?
I guess when we are identifying a subfactor need, it's usually a project-specific issue or item that we want, and we're usually making that determination when we're putting the scope together. So in our district, we're trying to get our scopes and our FTP sites populated at that 10-week time frame. So we'd probably be making that type of a decision at that point in most cases going forward.
Okay. Another question, Victoria?
Sure. Will project pre-qualifications be posted early, like the DBE Edge goals, to also help consultants build their team?
I think we kind of touched on that a little bit, right, Cindy?
Well, we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, I mean, I can give my perspective. So from my perspective, we're putting out our draft scopes and our FTP sites earlier, trying to get that in. From an agent, from my perspective, I don't know why we couldn't put out maybe the draft pre-qualification, because we're sort of putting some of that information together. It's the issue is the caution, it will change, right? We may add something, take something off. But if personally, I think we can put a draft list out when we put all the other information on the FTP site, with that caveat that it's not final until it's final on the posting.
Cindy, do you have anything to add or?
No, no, thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Another question, rapid fire. We're in our final 3 minutes of this session.
Any advice for a firm to win their first project with ODOT?
Wow. Mike, you got a thought on that?
Cover everything we've covered today.
Right.
Yeah, no, it really depends on the firm, what their capabilities are, what the projects are. You know, for sure, if you're looking to get your first project, definitely meet and greet, obviously, because we really need to get to know you. So in that case, you said is a meet and greet required? If you're trying to break into the market, we need to know who you are first. So that would be a case when you would really want, but you know, to do a meet and greet. But so it doesn't mean you won't be selected. I mean, if your LOI shows it, warrants it, we would still select you. But no, I don't know. I would just say follow the advice. There's been a lot of advice on both sides of the coin given today. So, but if you are new to ODOT, then definitely public references is really important, because working for a public agency versus private is different, and so that's how we'll be able to know that you kind of know the routine working for the government. That would be helpful. And then depending on your size too, breaking in as a sub helps, so we get to know you. But it doesn't have to be that way, but it could help. Just the familiarity.
Okay, Victoria, I think we've got time for maybe one more.
Can I just add that?
Oh yeah, Harvind, sure.
So I would say try and try and try again. Don't give up. Keep trying. And you will figure it out, and people will know you, and definitely sub, and it will happen. It's not an overnight. There's no guarantees in life, period. So there's no guarantees in winning an ODOT prime, but you can keep trying.
Yeah, and I'm glad you piped in, Harvind, because I think about your time with the safety program, and I always thought you do a very good job of you know, the meet and greet and trying to share with us how you've subbed on safety studies for certain firms and introducing us to, you know, individuals on your staff that actually do some of the safety work and, you know, developing those relationships over time. And showing how you're plugging into our process and doing good work. You're just doing it at a sub-consultant level. I think it helps build confidence that you're someone that we also could have prime. So thank you for piping in. One last question, Victoria.
How does ODOT feel about flipped consultant teaming arrangements? For example, two firms team on a project where they each submit as prime/sub.
Let's do one more around the room. Let's start with Stefan. How do you treat it?
So we see that on a same project. I think our district perspective typically is one team is probably stronger than the other when you get to it. So we usually will make a determination of which of those two firms is or two teaming arrangements is the strongest.
Okay. 30 seconds or less. Mike or Cindy, you want to say anything in addition to that? How you treat it?
Same thing. Yeah. No, it's good. Because one firm may have a little more strength than another in the particular area. So if you want to try it, flip it, that's fine.
Cindy? Yep. Shaking her head.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. It's just important to make sure you show who is doing what, and what the roles will be.
All right. Well, we almost finished on time. We're 1 minute over, but I thought you guys all did a really great job. I really enjoyed the discussion. I want a virtual round of applause for our panelists today who did a fabulous job of preparing, gave succinct answers, and hopefully people learned a lot from the interaction. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle and team. Next, we're going to move into the awards portion of this morning's event. And I would like to remind everybody that if you're connected to a VPN, you may want to go ahead